Okay, so welcome to Channel 27, everybody. Today is another exciting day. We have Clif High here again back with us, and we're going to talk about a various amounts of subjects today. Nothing in particular, just kind of touch base on some of his new WebBot report stuff, and maybe talk about Antarctica, hopefully, and also Australia, and kind of see how that's lining up to my astrology. So, Cliff, thanks for coming on again. It's always a pleasure talking to you. How are you
Sure,
doing?
thank you.
All right. So where should we start? Can we just address the first question first that everybody keeps asking me about Litecoin, Bitcoin, and the numbers that
Sure,
they
sure.
brought up? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so it turns out that on February 11th, as I noted in some interviews, Bitcoin, if you summed up Bitcoin, Bitcoin Gold, and Bitcoin Cash, it was 13,700. So as I said earlier, I missed it by about that much. And the reason I can say that is that when I made that forecast it was a year, a month, and some days ahead of the February, and it was before any of the forks of Bitcoin. And so my data sets are dealing with Bitcoin as a totality. And it takes a long time for the Bitcoin Cash and the Bitcoin Gold and any other future Bitcoins to separate themselves out linguistically. So we pretty much have to lump them all together to some degree when I get a number set around Bitcoin, because I don't have it that differentiated. And then the issue of Litecoin could be market cap. See, there's the problem. Uh, it could be price or it could be market cap. Usually, I don't see anything relating to market cap per se coming through in the data sets, because it's a metric in a set of language, market capitalization and these kinds of things that are tainted to a certain extent by context that derive from the stock market. And so I don't have a tendency to focus on those. And the 1-to-5 ratio for Litecoin to Bitcoin set is both in the weighted numeric emotional values within the sets of Bitcoin and Litecoin, but it's also was also represented in a ratio statement within the data sets themselves as 5-to-1, spelled out, FIVE space TO, so on. And so under the circumstances, I still think it'll be price. That'll be the metric by which we'll judge the 5-to-1 relative Litecoin to Bitcoin. And I still think we're going to see May surprises for announcements for Litecoin. Although we've gotten a few already in March, I don't think they're really the emotional. They don't have the emotional gravitas that I was expecting. And so there was a little blip on the emotions, but either the timing wasn't correct or this is not the announcement that we're waiting on. And that happens frequently, that I'll get a wide meme where I'll get lots of stuff about a particular meme and it spreads out over a long temporal area.
Right. Well, and per this new date I'm using with the charts and everything, May and April look really good.
Yeah.
So, I would say, I think March 30th, quite honestly, with my astrological things are going to tick up. But
well, we've already had the emotional shift occur that was within the data sets for March 17th. And so it occurred at that period of time. I mean, I'm running reconciliation routines. They don't take very long. And so we're into that. And then we've seen a price change. We've seen the green all the way through on the market cap on all the cryptos. And it's obviously won't hold until April or May, but that data set that showed April and May leading us off into the summer is actually being fulfilled now in the shift, because the emotional shift for March was part of that larger set. And again, it's one of those, as we tick off all of these temporal markers, I have more confidence in the ones that remain. And say that you had a data set that you could get 100 temporal markers from, and you get 50 that show up. The odds on or the calculations I make is not really odds, on the remaining 50 always leave 5 to 10% that won't show up at all, because it's the dirt or the garbage that shows up within the data. But out of that 50 that remain, I've got a high confidence that any given one of those 50 will be part of the 40 that will actually manifest. Make sense?
Yeah, somewhat. As much as I can understand.
But yeah, we're on the track, and it's interesting that it popped off on the 17th. We saw the emotions shift over, and now we're seeing the reaction within the market
Well, I
space.
was excited it went down because I bought more yesterday or the day before, whenever it was, it hits when it went to
Yeah.
7,000. I was snatching that up, make up for my $17,000 buy. Oh,
That's what you have to do, though,
yeah,
is the dollar averaging, right? That was a real key thing from David Morgan, the silver investor guy, who's with the LODE coin. He's been talking about that, but David was really big into to just buy the silver. And one week you pay a few dollars more for it than you do the next week. Sometimes you pay a lot more for it, but over time, as a saver, the dollar income averaging lowers your average cost for all of the cryptos the same way that it would for silver.
yeah. Well, I'm convinced it's not going anywhere. So that's good. And, another interesting thing with all the charts that I've done now with everybody that has, so now since you came on my show, I've done a lot of people that have, follow you, a lot of people's charts. And it's so interesting because most people, Jupiter is in Libra right now. Okay. And Libra per the sidereal zodiac. And when Jupiter goes into Scorpio, this is a lot of people's hitting their money finance chart. Like the money's going to come in, and that's after September. So it's just interesting. Like all of those people had these huge influctuations in their finances after September when Jupiter goes into Scorpio. So it's going to be really interesting to see, because I think that has a lot to do with it too. Because per what I'm using now, it has a Libra ascendant, and Scorpio is the second house. So second house is money, gains. And right now, Jupiter doesn't like to be in Libra. When Jupiter hits Scorpio, it's in a good spot. The money will come in. So I'm
And
convinced.
that's September, you say?
Yeah, September.
And could it be that by when you characterize a lot of people? Okay, so Jupiter, what's its revolution? It's a long planet, isn't it?
Yeah, it takes about a year. So it's a year transit. Hmm.
But no, I was thinking, it's like Saturn? When they say you have your Saturn return, do you get a Jupiter return that same way?
You can, but the Jupiter would be every how many years? So every I think it's 10 or 8, 10 or 18. I forget the exact off the top of my head, but it's the same as 2008. No, 2000,
Okay, that's just what I was kind of
yeah.
getting at. Was
2008. Yeah.
Yeah, and even more so, say that of the people you're talking about, they're a self-selecting group, and say that they mostly, and I'm going to use broad terms, fit within a particular age group. It could be, or two particular age groups, and it could be that the Jupiter return part of it is very key because it sort of brings them to you as well as brings them into this transition period in the early part of fall. And that was just this cohort that was self-selecting that just had this, I guess you'd call it an aspect of their lives being highlighted, and they needed some way to, express it, interact with it.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say that they were mainly of uh, a certain age group?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. So
No.
that theory's screwy
That,
then.
yeah, but my clients tend to be born between 1948 to, like, I have a 1948 to 19, we'll say 50, 1960. Now, I get a lot of 1966. No, nobody that's my age. I barely get.
Oh, okay.
I've only done one person that's born in 1984, the same year I'm born. It's weird. So and then I have a younger crowd, but I would say like 1990s. But I usually tend to have an older crowd, which is surprising to me. But it's females and males, 50-50 mix.
Right.
I
Yeah, I'm
don't
just
really
thinking
have
about that in terms of self-selecting and the individuals involved. So you're going to probably end up in that group. Say that you had that elder mix and then the younger mix. The younger people are going to go through their first or second Jupiter return if it's on a 10-year plus cycle, relative to their lives.
Hmm.
So they'll be getting a big uh, sort of like passage feeling. And
Yes.
then the older people will be more comfortable with it because they will have had a number of those 10-year cycles, and
Yes.
they'll be able to sort of anticipate it a little bit and go with the flow a little bit better. But
Yes.
we'll both be reacting the same way. So
Yeah.
interesting.
It is very interesting. It's so interesting the patterns. So like the days that people actually like submitted through my PayPal, like the same days the those people all have like very similar correlations in their charts. It's pretty amazing. And that's what I like to do. I like to track all that kind of fun stuff. So just
Yeah,
learn.
interesting. Yeah, from your viewpoint, really, you're sort of like able to get all of this data across a broad spectrum and get a very interesting picture because, of course, it is self-selecting because these people come to you, but that doesn't matter. It just examine that group separate from the rest of the social order, and just that tells you a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And another interesting thing is all the people that are have invested in crypto and that are in the crypto scene have similar patterns in the charts with certain nakshatras, certain things, certain planets in Capricorn, certain planets in Pisces, a lot of Scorpio, and it's just so interesting because they all have different intentions. Like they all have such good intentions. Like they all have these visions with crypto, like in a different like a different way. I can't really explain what I'm trying to say, but it's not like the typical stock market trader's chart. Okay, because I've seen a
Sure,
lot of those too. It's
sure.
different. It's more of the visionary chart, more of the
Well, that's it exactly as visionary, because see, this is software or technology changing society. And the first people that get it are the visionaries. And then you get the early adopters, and then you get the mainstream, and then you get the late adopters, and then the resistance in that particular order. And the visionaries are usually only 1.5 to 3% of any given larger population. And then within the early adopters, there will be another visionary group that is like 1.5% again, but the early adopters in total are 13%. So it's my contention that what we're seeing is software has eaten up money and given us cryptos. It's now being adopted the same way that software is adopted or technology is adopted by the society as a whole. And so we're about to transit from the 1.5% into that larger group of 13.5%. And so we're going to see the early adopters come on in, especially now that we're starting to get the technological hurdles down. And once those barriers are lowered, we'll see a 13% of the population move in, and your charts therefore will probably spread out in
Mhm.
terms of the kind of people that will be seeking both your advice as well as their interaction with the cryptos, because they'll be coming at it from a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's going to be real interesting though when we hit the flush of the 13.5%, because that occurs at about one way to look at it is within the overall population. In a marketing sense, you get this burst of real emotional evangelical kind of a response to it that occurs as you go from 4.5% of the total population into the 6% and then on into 10. And there are these two little bloops in the marketing viewpoint of technology or any product or fad or whatever going through the society. And so those will be likened to manias. They'll be somewhat brief, and they won't be a mania at all, because that's really going to come when we hit the 10% of the population. Then we start getting into the mania. So it's just like gold rushes or any of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's going to be quite fascinating to watch that process over this next year and a half.
Okay, my last astrological kind of weird subject. What are your thoughts on these? Have you seen me use these?
Yeah, I've seen those. I've seen
Yeah.
those critters. Sure, dowsing rods. I've
What are
I've
your
got
thoughts
some.
on these? I've,
They're
yeah.
really interesting in concept. I was first introduced to dowsing when I was a kid, maybe 5 or 6 or whatever, in California, and because we were staying on an area where there was no water, and you had to, going out with sticks, actually bent sticks put under pressure, and go and hunt for water. And it was very successful to do that. And so obviously that affinity of humans, water, et cetera, that level of it functions. If using it as a telltale is going to be, as with all of this stuff, subjective or influenced by the ability of the individual to screen their mental processes out of the equation, so to speak, right? If you obviously, if you put those in the hands of somebody that's got a tremor disease, you're going to get a different level of response out of them than someone that is an active meditator and can just sit.
Yes.
So there is that range that you have to bear in mind as you go forward with it. But I've seen some pretty remarkable examples of accuracy with them. And some of the accuracy includes especially the metal wire within a different metal handle. I've seen people use that to determine metal in the ground, and I can even do that myself. If I have a set of those. I've actually got a set of those that are made with 5/9 pure silver wire in 6/9 pure copper holders that I made. And they're very accurate, but I just don't have much use for them.
Yeah.
That because there isn't a lot of metal for me to hunt up or whatever. But
Right.
I just happen to have some of this 5/9 pure silver wire and was monkeying around with it. But absent that, um, it's a way of if you think about how humans are made appropriately, you realize that there is no such thing as the unconscious. Okay, there is not that mind. We are conscious and we are part of consciousness, even if we're unconscious and knocked out. However, the human is actually composed of three minds that are resident in the body continuously. These three minds are the body mind and the desire mind and the feeling mind. And we can express those in terms of dominance, one over the other two any given time, and it can shift constantly. It's related to your breathing patterns, and the alternating nostrils, all of this kind of thing. You can actually control it. The yogis used to do breath control exercises, shutting off one nostril in order to be able to maintain a particular state within body mind and try and exclude desire mind and feeling mind. This is a broad kind of a discussion. I won't go into too much detail. Women are frequently in there throughout the day, more often in feeling mind than they are in desire mind, with males being the opposite of that. Okay, but this is not your entire mental structure. These are the parts that are, if we want to use the term, trapped in the physical corporeal body, which is a condensate of energy. And as such, these three minds are only connected via the Shoshona, which is this silver thread. It's described in the occult literatures or in the yogic literature. And this thread connects you to what everybody in woo-woo land or in New Age world calls their higher self.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not necessarily higher or lower, but it's just not shoved into the body with the rest of you. Those minds are the knowing mind and the thinking mind. And then there's actually reason and rightness, which are sort of halfway in between. But the knowing mind and the thinking mind are outside of our corporeal structure. And that's what you're actually attempting to tap into with any of these divination methods. And all diviners of all stripes are attempting to tap into knowing mind and thinking mind. And they may describe it differently. They may say they're trying to tap into the Akashic records, or they're trying to get their higher self, or they're trying to connect with, Baba Ganoush,
Yeah. Right.
it's something up there. But nonetheless, it's without prejudicial language attached to it. That's the structure that you're actually getting into. Now, so Zen meditation has a number of meditative practices that you use to sharpen your skill. And in some of those, you do actively separate body, mind, and from desire and feeling mind. And you can actually then rejoin them and kind of get desire out of the picture. And so it's feeling mind that's dominant, and awareness, and then body mind. And so you're just there in the Zen zone, and you are basically just a vibrating antenna, and you're just attempting to calm it, calm it, calm it. And at that point, I would think that you could become extremely accurate with virtually any kind of divination, telltale, or technique. And it's from those kind of exercises under the name of Chan meditation that the Taoists derived all of this structure around the I Ching. They really got into it very heavily with the numbers, and they would do things in their meditative state and then basically read the future. And there's a very famous story about this, okay? And I won't bore anybody, but and I'll see if I can remember the details. You can look it up. But Mao Zedong was the leader of China. He was the communist that ran all of China, and he wanted to modernize. And he took his son one day to a local market. This was after he'd conquered China and taken everything from Chiang Kai-shek and thrown out all the Westerners. And he went to a market, and there were the traditional fortune tellers, divination people there. And he had his son with him. They went and they saw this guy who was a very well thought of and like internationally known even in that day, Taoist, among a very select group of people. I mean, it wasn't like he was famous or anything. But anyway, he threw the I Ching or his Yarrow sticks and came up and said, because Mao said, had told his son, you know, I want you to experience this because all of these things are going away. We're going to modernize China, and we're not going to give in to superstition, and we're going to ban this and ban all of the religion and all of this. And so I want you to see what it was like. And so he takes him to this guy, and the guy throws the Yarrow sticks, and he's just sweating like a pig, apparently, because he knows who he's dealing with, right? You just don't want to piss Mao off. And anyway, so he comes back, and he was thought to be one of the most clever divinators of all time. Because what do you tell Mao Zedong about his future on, you know, in such a case? You can't tell him his real future because you know, that's the crime of the future foretellers is accuracy. That's the only sin in your line of work is accuracy. And that's the sin that will get you into real problems. Sometimes you have to sort of fudge the truth or at least shade it a bit. And that's what this guy did. And so he came back and said, 85-41. And Mao looks at him and says, huh? And the guy said, 85-41. And Mao says, well, what does that mean? And he says, well, oh, great one, I can't tell you, but that's what has been delivered to me in the process. And I'm sworn an oath as a Taoist to be accurate to that process. And he was. And when you get into the line of work, as you know, you have to put yourself in there as well. And so your integrity is part of the whole process. You don't go out and bullshit people for money. That's not the point, right? It's too much damn work. So anyway, the guy says 85-41, and it might have been 85-43. I mean, the numbers, but it was two numbers like that. And so Mao didn't know what they meant, but he came back and he named his personal private regiment of the People's Liberation Army that guarded him and his family, the 85th 43rd Regiment, without knowing what it was. And it turns out it was how old he would be when he died and how long he would rule China.
Wow.
He lived to be 85 and he ruled China for 41 or 43 years. And so the divinator didn't break his oath, but he also didn't put himself in a situation of saying, well, hey, dude, you're going to die when you're 85, you know?
Yeah. Well, they're funny because like they only answer certain questions. Like they'll say no. They won't answer if they don't feel like it. They have their own little personality.
Okay, that's the you're putting an emotional state into yourself because basically you're talking about trying to reach the thinker and the knower, okay? And so when you connect that way, there's a whole lot of times you're not supposed to know. and you can't handle the truth. So
Exactly.
they're not going to tell you.
I agree. And then when people ask those questions, sometimes like on the lives, like I do those for entertainment, quite honestly, because I think they're fun and I think
Mhm.
they're interesting. I don't really like, I wouldn't tell people to actually like make life decisions based on my rods. Like it's just, but it's interesting because I use them for my own questions. But if I ask it something that it's for myself, they do not answer. They're like, I don't think so, Heidi. You're not you, but they'll answer for anybody else. Just they won't. If I'm
Right.
asking them about me personally, they don't do it. It's so crazy, but they have a mind
Well,
of.
there's an old saying that goes along with that that's in both the Taoist and the yogic tradition. And it's like, basically it's you can ask too much and you try, and really what's happening is you're trying to jump the temporal curve ahead of time.
Yeah,
And sometimes that's not wise.
yeah, true, very true. Yeah, so I have to sometimes calm it down with. The Akashic records. We don't have to talk about them today, but do you know? Do you know? Have some knowledge on that? Because people ask me about that all the time, and I really don't know.
Okay, so here's I can give you a couple of different ways to think about it. Okay,
Okay.
but in terms of accuracy in words, they're going to be extremely misleading, no matter what. All right, no matter how we try and characterize it here in our bodies, we're not really going to grasp it. But the concept is that this is the record of everything that has ever happened. All right, and so it's the same. If you take the thought too far, you come up with the idea of the time frames. And so you might convince yourself that the past still exists and you can go back in time or go ahead in time. And this thought that occurs to you that you could time travel is because you think of the past as a continuous state that still exists, where all the consciousness is involved is still there, and you could like plop in the middle of it and interact with it. And it
Right.
doesn't exist that way. But the Akashic record concept is valid at a number of different levels. Okay, and one way to think about it is that it's the actual, what you're actually talking about is the quantum entrainment that binds all of universe together with all of these molecules that are all continuously creating themselves in this what I call the little bloop theory. And so as they come into universe, they have to become entrained to all the other molecules in universe. And this is where we get the ever-present now, localized space effects, universal time effects, all of these kind of things. And that happens at a quantum level as each and every particle jumps in and becomes part of universe. And so we as humans within our corporeal world can store information in the form of ones and zeros on various different kinds of media. And we can do it even with light, using light to read bloops, so to speak, or damage or changes within a thin film of polymer. And so we have laser disc and we can read information that way. And what we're actually looking at is the lattice work of the molecules within those polymer plates. And we bounce a laser off, and if it comes out this way, it means a 1, and if it comes out that way, it means a 0. And so then you can deduce things, and then the machine works very fast. And so we can store movies on CDs, that kind of thing, right? But it's a very crude um, mechanism, but it's actually involving not this atom and not that atom, but their relationship to each other relative to how the laser strikes it and how we get a feedback from that. So imagine universe where it's creating quantum entanglement at layers upon layers upon layers upon layers for each and every atom in ways we're not even able to conceive. So the quantum entanglement is the Akashic record. That's how universe stores knowledge, and it stores the sum total of what I call, universe by my definition is the sum of all human experience over time. So we're all contributing to universe.
Right.
And the materium is the place that we're in doing all of this stuff here where matter actually exists. And in order for us to transmit that information to universe, it's all happening at a quantum level with all of our various different kinds of entanglements and stuff, like I say, at levels we cannot even possibly conceive because our minds are not big enough. What little minds we've got shoved into these little meat sacks.
Meat sucks. That's good. Yeah. And while we're on it, somebody asked me, and I did a reading for this person, and he wrote, "All right, the chicken and the egg, interstellar space travel, not parallel dimension. How could we travel to another galaxy and still maintain our personality through astrological alignments from birth? Due to the fact of the energy from our solar system have massive influence over one's personality, and how would we just get whacked from new influential energies due to the decrease or loss of natal alignment? Thoughts?"
That's okay. So that actually is what I think would occur. All right. And there's some evidence that indeed we would get whacked. Okay. And that, so there's a famous woo-woo incident of a reverse engine or a patched up, I think, spaceship UFO. It was at, I think it was at Vandenberg in California. All right.
Not related to them, guys.
I
Relax.
know. Okay, so we know you don't own that place, right? But in any event, it was out in the desert there in California, and these 6 or 7 engineers are taken for a ride in it. They transit from this facility where the spaceship was out into the desert, some 30, 40, 50 miles away. The distance is immaterial, and they were told before they went, get out of the spaceship. You'll have a number of minutes there. It's not going to return without you. Get out of it, put something in your pocket from the environment you find, and then when you come back, you'll have that because your mind won't want to function. All right. And so that's what happened to the people that were the passengers in this vessel. They put dirt and bits of plants and stuff in their pockets. And then when they got back, they couldn't believe that they actually had their pockets stuffed full of desert sand and all of this kind of thing. Their minds did not function because of the schism that was caused by this transit at no by because they moved with no time involved. That's what threw their minds off. Okay, so but even the other way, even with time involved doing interstellar kind of stuff, it's exactly as they're describing. The pulse doesn't know where to hell to find you basically when you transit that way. So there's got to be an impact on you mentally, and you would not have the same personality. Now we know that your DNA is also not going to store the same kind of information because we had the 2 twins, and the one astronaut has got his telomeres back and his DNA is radically changed. And so we can no longer think of DNA as the storehouse of information about how to build our bodies. We have to think of DNA the other way. As our bodies build DNA to store probably our input that goes on out to the quantum entrainment that leads into the Akashic records. And so it's storing information the other way, not necessarily for the creation of our body. And so if you were to transit outside of the cell structure of our solar system, you'd have to do it extra temporally. Okay, you'd have to go beyond time. And you can do that. The spaceships that we've seen, the UFOs, the Element 115, all of this have a tendency to promote the idea that indeed we can collapse time and just shift ourselves within the ever-present now. The pulse will recreate us in that new spot, but our brains won't be getting the same input from our same solar system with the same planetary alignment that it used to get. So who the hell knows what's going to happen to us personality-wise? And then coming back is going to be even stranger because you'll jump back and you'll be doing it extra temporally from the time that you leave. But okay, so say that you can instantaneously transmit yourself to the Pleiades by folding time and jumping there in your spaceship. And then you're there for a month because the Pleiades are cool. It's nice to swim at wherever you're at. You know, there's decent food. They got a nice buffet on Sunday. So, it's a good place. You stay for a month and everybody likes you there. And then you come back. Well, a month is still transited in the ever-present now. And you're not able to shift back in time to a period of time closer to when you left. So there would have been a month gap in all of the stuff that had happened here on Earth. And when you jump back here, just like when you jumped into the Pleiades, you're going to find that the pulse, while it'll recreate your body, your mind is going to have to play catch up and in terms of getting in sync with all of the complexity and the all of the radiation, if you will, from the sun, from all of the planets, their alignment and all of that, and the magnetic fields and so on. So, this is why I think that space travel for us may indeed just be limited to within the cell structure of the solar system.
It's way beyond my thinkings, but yeah, I
Well,
mean,
when you jump to Mars, okay, if we say we could get to Mars in 3 months, you're under the influence of the regular planets and everything as you change your location within the solar system over to Mars. Even if you could do it with an instantaneous jump where you'd go from here to there with basically no time having transited, you're still within those same um, um, energies, although all of the angles and everything would change in a way radically that it took a long time for the 2.5 months to change. So it would be very much like a astro jet lag.
oh, that's funny. Oh God. Well, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look. I want to look into the Akashic records. Like, I want to do more of that one day when I have time, like to research more of that. And but right now, time is the essence.
Yeah.
So, okay. Then, real quick, somebody asked me if you could elaborate. You said you were a dog before in a past life, I guess, and somebody wants you to elaborate on that.
Okay. We're all okay. So the yogis say that the average is 84 million lives you have before you become human. All right. So all humans are very much quality beings. It's taken us a long time to get to become a human. You're not just created as a human. That's kind of bogus. All right. You earn your status as a human. And this is an understanding that I also share. And it can be found in the Taoist and even part of a lot of the traditions, the religious traditions that led to Zen in Japan. But the idea is throughout a lot of these different cultures. And so you evolve through all of these lives as creatures as you go along. And so, for instance, the yogis would say that a guy that was a good hunter and had great eyesight for distance spent a lot of time as an eagle. Okay, and because you have to grow your senses that you bring with you into your life as a human. And this gets you to what's known as your first human universal face. And prior to that, you were all of these other species. And I just got stuck as a dog for a while. Okay, and you progress. So it's not guaranteed that you're going to become a human just because the spark works and it evolves over time. It's not guaranteed. And so you progress from life to life to life to life to life. And if you get stuck in one, you kind of screw up. And these impressions or these quantum level Akashic record kind of sync ups stick with you. All right. So animals like me, especially dogs, and I'll be out, clamming or surf fishing, and dogs will run from a quarter of a mile up the beach just to come and say hi. And I've never met a dog that was intended to do me harm, was angry at me or anything. As soon as they see me, it's like, oh, hey, buddy, I recognize you.
Yeah.
You were a
I
dog.
have that same thing in my same thing, and I now I know how that is with astrology, but I always call myself Snow White. Like, I've hand fed raccoons. Like, my whole family, my mom's like this, my sister's like this. I could be into a room of like rabid raccoons, stray pit bulls, and pit bulls have a bad rap. Like, I like animals a lot. I like animals more than people, but like all dogs, all cats, all animals will come up to me, my mom, my sister, and it's nuts and love us.
Yeah, I've had that. My brother-in-law has a cat that's famous for basically being a ninja cat, attack cat. Drives humans crazy. And I didn't know this, and it was like I came on in there one day and, oh, hi, kitty, how you doing?
Yeah. My mom gave CPR to a squirrel. I'm not joking. My mom also has like, so she's we definitely have something. We were a bunch of animals, we always say, but it's interesting. Okay, and so okay, in your webbot report you brought up Australia, And I've been having like weird intuition things with Australia. And for some reason, I like to look at some different countries and areas, and I always say like, well, this could some. I look at the charts, and I've noticed some interesting things with Australia, certain parts. So, what are your thoughts? What's going on in Australia this year or the next couple years?
The data sets pick up Australia easily because the Aussie language, even though it's English, their contexts are distinct. And they have a number of things that you just don't see um, in any other form of English speaking anywhere else on the planet. And usually those are related to the animals and the animal population and everything that's derived from that unique ecosystem that is Australia. So it's relatively easily to isolate, but even talking to the bastards, it's hard to get some meaning out of it, right?
Yeah.
So, but the data sets have for maybe, I don't know, in the reports, it's been maybe 2 years or three that we've had this intermittent appearance of Australia. And as it would flare up and then die out, flare up and die out, mostly it seemed to center around resources, as in mining, oil, and population, and housing and corruption, like three major sets.
Yeah.
And the housing and the corruption are dominant now. And they've brought in this other fourth set, which is the federated government of Australia. And that's the first time that this has appeared. And that's why Australia was in this last report and was specifically pulled out. Technically, it's not really part of the crypto stuff and the bare naked wealth stuff, but there are a lot of Australian readers. And I've been continuously pulling out these things for Australia that have been very prescient. And they've also been good temporal markers for other things within the larger data sets. And we again have that here. So the temporal marker is going to be the problems that originate within Australia's housing market being scandal tainted, being corruption tainted, to the point that what we would think of here in the United States as a constitutional crisis will evolve. That's what the data sets would seem to imply, that there's going to be a federation um, agreement or document crises, and that's going to come out because of or it's going to arise or develop or evolve because of the scandals around housing corruption. And I don't know if this is mortgages or where the corruption is. In the past, the data sets have been very accurate about Australian corruption, and we're even able to say that, oh, well, look, there's going to be a weird link between these two countries in Africa and Australian housing scandals. And sure enough, it would show up. It was just out. It's totally strange. So I decided to throw it in because it brings up, because it acts as a temporal marker for a lot of the stuff within the crypto space, not necessarily related to where Australia is on the planet, although there are a couple of items within crypto space that are related just because one's in Indonesia and the other's in India.
Interesting. Another thing I think was pretty fascinating, you wrote in the reports about how there's going to be some interesting things with particular groups and possibly like religious groups and stuff, and that can have some upheaval. And if you look at the transits right now, Mars is with Saturn in Sagittarius, sidereal zodiac. Okay, so everybody thinks Saturn is in Capricorn, but it's not. K2's in Capricorn, but Saturn just went into Sagittarius. Now Mars is there. Mars is going to conjunct, and this is intense. Like this is going to be, that's exactly what that is of what you wrote in there too. So
it's so okay. So you're saying then that this is going to intensify the interscene warfare within the religious organizations?
yes, religious, because Sagittarius is the sign of like belief systems. It's,
Oh, okay, okay.
so it's kind of like a lot of people with prominent planets, like the Pope has heavy Sagittarius chart, K2 Jupiter, so there's a lot of that and a lot of different religions. So when somebody's really like firm about religions, they usually have planets in Pisces, like a Jupiter in Pisces, or planets in Sagittarius, so it's interesting because Mars, the warrior, Saturn, the, restriction, fighting for, it's just like a big war,
Right,
boiling
right.
water in Sagittarius. It's definitely like a interesting thing. But who knows what will happen. I'm just saying this could be definitely a rough
Sure, one of those periods. Well, we've actually had physical manifestation of the sets in the sense that there was just the religious guy that died. I can't think of his name here. They want to
Billy
make a
Graham.
there you go. Right. Okay. And so whenever you have a major, okay, a religion is defined as a cult that survives the death of the founder. And whenever you have a cult whose founder dies like this, and you have to really put him in that category, you're going to have major stresses on the underlying organization as to who's going to take over, and especially since there's so much money involved. And so we're going to see more of that. We're also, I think, going to see a lot of well, it just seems in the data sets it's talking about this as though it was the 1920s or 1930s again, in terms of the formation of the Four Square Church and the Amy Semple McPherson, the fake kidnapping, all kinds of history back then. And the data sets are showing that we're having a temporal echo during these years of that period of time. And it's discussing about religions, busting up and going away, and others where the leaders are going to pop off, and then others where the scandal's going to take over. And so it's a massive amount of churn.
Yeah. Well, and then it can also be like, it also can be terrorism stuff too, because of Mars. Mars is the warfare, it's the fighter, it's explosions, fires, it's all that stuff. It's just crazy. And right now, Mercury and Venus are in Pisces, and you could just see the accidents because of drugs. And I mean, I listen to police scanners and kind of listen to the transits with it and Mercury's vehicles, and you see all these bridge accidents. It's like, it's pretty nuts actually. So yeah, okay. And then what are your thoughts on Trump meeting Rocket Man?
None whatsoever. Didn't know it was going to occur and hadn't.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that's good, or do you think it's positive?
um, I think it's got to be positive at some level, certainly. Yeah. But whether or not there's going to be anything meaningful coming on out, nope, hadn't even thought about it.
Yeah. Okay. And I really kind of wanted to hear what you had to say about Antarctica, because I know you talk about this occasionally, and it's another thing I kind of want to research a little bit more of. But is there anything in particular that you see happening?
We had stuff in the data this last time about our continuing language growth around the secret space program, and or classified space program, however you want to characterize it, and yet more Antarctica language. Antarctica is, of course, the perfect place to do just that kind of research. Very difficult to leak information out from there. But then also, curiously, I think maybe 15 or 20 days after the report was released, something like that, we had the beginning of the language appear in our reconciliation as we get the announcement that that the administration wants to form another branch of the military. And this is going to be the space branch, the same way we've got an Air Force. This will be the Space Force. And they're actually putting some money into it. The language is showing up that there's going to be some effort put behind it at a legislative level. And there's all kinds of reason to suspect that they're actually formalizing something that already exists. And so we should see a fairly rapid growth around the subject and the language. And if the report is accurate, we'll see a lot more language around space and battles and Antarctica show up over summer. And it would be organic in the sense that the language would be coming out because maybe they'll say, oh, we need our first planet-wide military spaceport to be located in Antarctica, something like that. and so that would do the fulfillment for the forecast. So it's not necessarily seeing battles over Antarctica in space so much as the language discussing it. And I think that that's actually the track that we're on at the moment, is there's going to be more and more of this language of officialdom moving into the camp of acknowledging via, in a sneaky way, that there's, that there's shit going on out there. And so not necessarily battles, although I've got to say that, our house here just shook like all hell, like a washing machine on massive tilt mode, with the meteor or whatever it was that came down off of the coast of Washington a couple of weeks back. And it's those kind of incidents that are increasing globally. If you look at let me see if I can think of somebody. Oh, Secure Team 10 on YouTube. On their daily videos, they've got pretty much a continuous stream of weird aerial phenomena, including UFOs, showing up all around the planet. So it wouldn't even necessarily surprise me if indeed there are space battles that will show up over Antarctica, but I kind of doubt that any of our media would ever let us know.
Yeah. It's, do you think we'll ever get the real truth on that? Or do you think things will actually get exposed?
Oh, I think certainly, I think your generation will. Okay, whether I'll live long enough to see it is questionable, but because there's a huge vested interest an emotional level and also in a financial level in the secrecy world. And we have to recognize that even if the people wanted to get the information out, there are people that make money from keeping it secret.
Yeah.
And that spreads throughout all of the deep state and into all of the corporations that support the deep state. So there's no economic, and there is an economic incentive to doing away with the secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
And that economic incentive is clear, it's easily seen, it could be described to corporations, and they would be drooling to end the secrecy and get up into space in a serious way and announce they've got all this kind of stuff. But there's a major problem. And that major problem is what they did for the 70, 80 years to keep it secret. All the people that were killed, all the lies that were told, all of the lives that were disrupted. And there is a social burden and a social obstacle there. It's very much like, and I can't say it that way, but it's very much a situation of where that burden has to be addressed. The karma of the terrible things that were done to keep it all secret has to be paid, acknowledged somewhere, somehow. Now, in South Africa, they tried to do it with the Truth and Reconciliation, and they went a great deal, and the society evolved underneath them, and the demographics changed, and now South Africa is in the process of degrading. In spite of the noble effort that began with the idea that we can live with these people that had been our horrible abusers, because many of them were institutionalized abusers. It wasn't like they were really into it so much as they didn't have much option other than to be abusive if they were in the army. And so we have that burden, and we don't have a mechanism for dealing with that secrecy burden, for undoing it. We don't have a Truth and Reconciliation. We don't have a system where we can say, come and tell us the truth about this, and you will be forgiven for those crimes that you committed in this process, but you'll have to undergo the following form of re-education or whatever. There has to be a penalty, a price paid. However, they won't necessarily have to kill people that indeed were doing killings. Now, and the problem that is facing us as a social order here in the US that is different than any of the other countries is that those individuals that are using the advanced technology to kill with impunity, and that's how they're censoring our social order, are continuing to do so, and they're at a cusp. And so you can probably look in all the astrological charts if you could figure out some central peg for the bad guys, or whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
those people trapped into the secrecy system. You would find that they're facing a very untenable situation. in order for them to continue and guard their secrecy and guard their own lives, they're going to have to be massively escalating the amount of dastardly deeds they do to protect that secrecy. And they recognize that it's a no-win situation, that it's a fail in the process of happening, and they just have to keep doing it, just basically to safeguard themselves and keep some semblance of a family life or whatever as they go forward. And this is why we see these intermittent attempts on the part of the powers that be to open things up, like with Tom DeLonge's, To the Stars Academy, right? Um, that kind of thing is an attempt on the part of that deep state officialdom to test the waters to see what's going to happen when they come on out. And the problem is they're not able to actually commit to it to find out what's going to happen. So we get all these little half-hearted attempts that fade over time and never really yield any results. Until we get the situation where we have people admitting to murder, mind control, drugging people, all of this kind of stuff, and accepting at an organizational level that was organizationally directed, we're not going to be able to get over this situation. Now, it may require violence in order for that to break. And even the people that are involved in it may actually wish or hope that there would be this break and they wouldn't have to live that way. And it may be that we will all have to participate in some level of social consciousness violence in order that this should occur. I don't think it can continue because they're at a point of escalation where they need to recruit so many more people that even in doing so, they're going to start breaking their own secrecy structure. It'll weaken it. You have to understand that in software, every time you add a for loop or a while loop, you're increasing the attack structure. The attack surface in the software where it can be gotten at. Every time the secrecy business hires new people, trains them, at some point the people that they're training get inculcated into the culture and they start learning things and guessing things. And the fatter the pyramid is, as they have to put more people underneath them, the weaker it becomes. And so you might see one or two people split off and then the whole corner crumbles and that entire division runs amok, or you get a bunch of people running around saying that, hey, I knew, I don't want to be part of this, and all of that kind of thing. And so they're right at that cusp in terms of how many people they can keep involved with it. It's also the same math and stuff that affects revolutions. And a lot of times in the former Soviet Union, they had a cadre of people that were just looking for what they called counter-revolutionaries. And because they knew they were out there and they knew they had a real problem, the control structure needed to employ people to go and root them out. And they called them the secret police, but their goal was to basically find the crumbling in the revolution, find the weak areas, and then keep busting it up. And so like I say, we're at that point now, only in a larger social order. It'll be interesting over the next couple of years because we do see the technology coming out in bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to learn. I mean, it's crazy how when you start going down the hole of learning and opening up your mind to it, because I was not aware of all the stuff, like all the deep state stuff. Okay. But now, and since I sell homes to a lot of people that work at NSA, Fort Meade, I work right there. And top secret guys, Air Force guys, and I sell them homes. If you heard the conversations and what I ask them, it's so uncomfortable for them, but I love doing it. I don't care. I can't control it. I ask them anyway. But just by their reactions and what they say and how they answer questions, it almost just confirms, just in a silence.
And that's their problem, with the Tom DeLonge when he brought out all of the stuff. It's like, big shrug. There's nothing there really. And it's because everybody knows. We've seen it in the movies. We've been educated enough to know that there are space aliens out there, and that that also that the deep state is keeping us from all of this really, what I think of as really cool knowledge and technology and fun stuff to play with, as they gradually leak it out into their buddies that put it out into the corporations. But who knows what else is out there,
Yeah, it's definitely in the charts too of what you just said, kind of like that. There's a lot of change. This is I and you know whether it's in the next few years, and there's a lot of things happening. United States chart, just everybody's charts. You can see the patterns. You can see the shifts, the changes, and quite honestly, and I will vouch to this until if I'm wrong, I always say I will admit it, but I Trump's chart is not like their chart, anybody else's.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
So
it would give you a unique perspective on it. There's no question about that. I mean, being able to do that kind of thing.
yeah, no, just the last few questions. This was from some of the people in the chat last night that I was in. The 1111 around the harmonic time or the 1987 drawing attention to digital clock. What is it?
Yeah, the harmonic convergence. Yeah. Um, Eh.
Is that like works
It's a diversion. It's a diversion. It's not necessarily meaningful at all. It can be meaningful at a like with the rods at a personal level if one puts a great deal of study into it.
got it?
Okay, so pattern seeing and that kind of thing uh, is useful. The military trains people to it. That's even the basis for remote viewing. That they train people in is basically getting yourself out of the way and allowing these patterns to present themselves and having awareness enough to be able to bring the patterns back and then give them out. The problem is or the opportunity with the remote viewers is they have no ideas to the goal. There's no mind getting in the way. They're simply a reportorial vehicle to show that whatever it is they saw in that pattern. Okay, but if you're seeing the patterns yourself, and so you're seeing a particular numeric pattern and so on, your mind is actively involved in that.
Okay,
And
I do see 1111 almost every day for the past 2 months, maybe twice a day.
okay, and it's a numeric. It has all the numerology involved, but then there's also the um, conscious mind versus the leaked information. So when I say everybody is psychic, what I'm really talking about as my premise for my work, what I'm really talking about is that everybody has little bits and pieces that are fed to them from knower mind and thinker mind. And that's what this is that you're discussing. The problem is we don't know what it means, and
Right.
it means something different for each of the individuals involved. Just because, so there is while there's a generic meaning to the numbers that gives rise to numerology, there are specific kinds of communication that are attempting to be made between the knower and the thinker and our desire, feeling, and body mind. And the mind necessarily must get involved there. So you need to have an examination of the symbology relative to yourself in order, I think, to get a better grasp on what's being delivered.
Yeah. All right, and last question, and then I will let you go. But can you talk about the massive web bot hit, Sophia the robot?
Well, I can discuss the Sophia the robot and the AI and so on. It was indeed forecast within the data sets for a number of years, actually, and the language evolved over time to include more and more sets that allow a better interpretation as to what we're looking at. But the Sophia the robot thing, it's one of those really curious, almost carnival tricks. Okay, there is no real AI there. There's no body mind there. There's no thinking mind there. No desire and no feeling. Even though the program within the computer that is running that particular animatronic, is able to spit out words that would suggest that it is feeling or it wants or something along these lines. There's no desire there. And then you'll also notice that they employ a lot of carnival tricks with that Sophia the robot. I've seen many of the YouTube videos, and in order for the robot to be given accurate cues as to when it should speak, the human actually has to touch it.
Oh,
or the human has to make a gesture in order to tell the robot, okay, now it's your turn to do something,
mm,
right? So there is no such critter as of this moment as a generalized artificial intelligence, and certainly not within that Sophia robot. And that robot has never had an emotion, nor can it, and it has no concept of I. So you and I as humans, and even you and I as when we were dogs, had a concept of I. That when we woke up every morning, we were the same as when we went to sleep. No robot will ever have that because a robot could go to sleep, so to speak. You could take the batteries out and you could change its wiring, and it would wake back up, and there's no continuity from of experience. There's no even experience or awareness within that machine. And we'll never get to the point where within the, I shouldn't say never, but the within the digital world that we've got at the moment, the ability to emulate emotion is increasing. And there's a lot of good stuff I like about AI, but it's not going to achieve the result that the people want, which is an android that has a sense of feeling or experience or awareness. All it is software replicating or reacting to the inputs it's told to react to. And so the humans I've noticed that are around the Sophia the robot, even when, especially when outside people are questioning. So when reporters come to interview the robot, look at the handlers of the robot and their interaction with it to see what's actually going on.
yeah. I have to agree with you. I don't think they have thoughts at all.
No. There's no self there,
Yeah.
and that's a distinct uh, energetic entity within life. Okay, and there's the key force and all of that, and all of these are intimately connected and inextricably connected. You can't take one away and give it to a machine. Just as you could download, theoretically you could download all of your impressions and thoughts into a data bank, but that doesn't mean your consciousness is continuing. It doesn't mean that you're continuing to live mentally. And so we know that that the human brain only stores about 5,000 impressions every single day. All right. So you had 5,000, you had many more impressions than that today. You had many more pings in your awareness than those 5,000. And you store those 5,000, most of them are gone and replaced tomorrow, and you carry from short-term from immediate memory into short-term memory very few of these impressions. And then you'll notice that your memories, as you go through your life, you'll find that some are in just perfect pristine clarity, and you can almost smell that bagel or whatever it was. And but there are very few and far between that are of that clarity, and that we don't actually store the mundanity that we run through constantly. Now, robots, they store all of that, and that's the only reason that they can function or appear to function as we would like our robots to, is because they've stored every single little bit of sensory input that hit those sensors. Whereas humans, we discard a great deal of them. And so if you were to store everything that you actually received, all those 5,000 plus impressions that made it to a certain emotional level, certain energetic level in your brain, if you were to store all of those day after day after day after day, then, and put it into a machine, and they could take those and put them back into a body, it would not be your personality, because your personality is composed of the things you chose one way or another to store, and then all the stuff you decided not to, right? So how many times do you comb your hair and you're actually aware of the full stroke of the brush, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't happen, right?
No, never.
But, and so it would make your personality entirely different if you were storing everything at that level.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, do you have anything else for us that we need to watch out for that we could take it?
Nothing that I wanted to go into right at the moment. We're going to see in the data sets a big shift within the cryptocurrency world over the April and May, get back into the exuberance again by the time we get into the final, well, the third and the fourth quarters of the year, the second half of the year. So I suspect June is going to be very energetic relative to cryptocurrencies. And in fact, the data sets are indicating that a lot of the people that would like it to dampen down so they go on vacation are going to be frustrated. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's exciting because I think it's such an exciting thing. So it's fun for me. It's something
Yeah.
I never got into, and I'm so glad I did. So glad I bought it 17,000. Keep buying more, so it doesn't matter. I
Yeah.
learned.
See, income. Yeah. Dollar purchase average. Yeah. Yeah.
I do think silver is still gonna go up too, though. That's in the
So
chart.
do I. So do I, because it's just so unique. Yeah. It's only material on the planet that has those two naturally occurring states and no other alloys to speak of. And it's been conceptually referred to as the psi metal, as in psychic metal. And it's been known that way for millennia. And there's a lot about the structure of the silver molecule and how it occurs that make it extremely effective with electricity. And apparently we haven't even begun to touch what it can do there.
Wow, that
So,
would be so interesting to do that with astrology, because I did that with nuclear energy. Like I studied nuclear energy and did charts on that, and on the guy that did the atomic bomb. And so that would be interesting to do, because like, the signs, certain planets are like Venus is silver, Pisces is silver. So there's certain
oh, okay.
that
Yeah.
you can do that with. So that's interesting. All right, Cliff. Well, thank you so much for coming on Channel 27 again. It's always a pleasure. And hopefully I will talk to you soon.
And hopefully you'll be off your suspension soon
Yes,
too.
really. I emailed the CEO today, so we'll see. Somebody gave me her personal email address. So never
Offer her a reading,
know. I
offer
did.
her a bribe. There you go.
Exactly what I said.
Okay, cool.
All
Cool. Hopefully it'll work.
right.